Hey, good people, welcome to another edition of 254 Rugby. In this particular edition, we go across the border. You see, Kenya and Uganda share quite a special bond when it comes to rugby. There is an intense rivalry on the field of play, great camaraderie off the field of play. Let's not talk about social media because those social media wars, they're never ending. But in between the social media wars, there's a lot of education that we share amongst the Kenyans and Ugandans. Remember, we are only split by the border, by Lake Victoria, by Mount Elgon. However, that's not why we're here. We're here to talk about Ugandan rugby, and I'd like to welcome a man who is associated with Fat Cats podcast. They're doing a great job in Uganda with their podcast, educating the rest of the world about what's going on in Uganda. Edwin Wabwire, how are you doing?
How are you, Michael? And hope Kenyan rugby is good as well.
I'm well. Kenyan rugby is good as it is all the time, never a dull day. We are currently in the seventh season. We're in the halfway point, and I just finished recording a podcast moments ago. Put it up online. We're in the halfway point. Cabras Sugar leading it. They want to extend their dominance into sevens. That would be interesting.
Well, Ugandan rugby, maybe just to start off, we had a successful Rugby Africa tournament held at the Dambole Stadium, a new place for rugby after quite some time. I think the last time we ever hosted rugby at Nambole was in 2010 in the sevens edition of rugby. Notably, Impis playing the national team there in the final and losing out to the national team select at that time. So it was a good homecoming for Ugandan rugby back at Nambole, which is synonymous with Ugandan football. But now we're getting to give it a platform for Ugandan rugby. And after that particular tournament, Uganda finishing fifth in rather a disappointing, heartbreaking loss to Zimbabwe. We managed to finish fifth in that nail biter against Senegal, going to sudden death and then sorry extra time, then sudden death. So one of those fixtures that will forever be remembered in Ugandan history. But then after that rugby event was done, we had a mini tournament, not mini in the kind of stature that it was for the king of Uganda, what they call the Kabaka Coronation Sevens, which was won by Walukuba. I think the rugby team in Jinja showed that they have the uh, energy to win a build-up tournament ahead of the sevens. So we've had two editions of the Uganda Rugby Sevens tournament. We have another edition this weekend at Chadondo Rugby Club. Kenyans are very fond of that ground. I don't know why. Maybe Michael, you'll be able to explain why. But that particular ground will be host to the third circuit that is going to be hosted this time round. We have had three back-to-back circuits, and notably in Entebbe, we had the Rhinos from Legends Rugby Club coming out on top, beating the Buffaloes in the final. And then we had the women as well, the Black Pearls beating the Avengers in that final. So setting up the pace for the table where they were top. And then notably in Mbale, which was just last weekend, we had the big four teams who suspiciously, I think maybe had a caucus and decided not to partake in the semifinals in Entebbe, all knocked out at the quarterfinal stage. So the final four had somewhat clubs that are not in the top four of Ugandan rugby. So with that being said, the top four clubs, that is Heathens, Pirates, Cobs, and Hippos, managed to come round into the second circuit, winning their quarterfinals and coming into the semi-final. With that, Pirates beating Cobs, and then the Hippos losing to Heathens in that particular fixture. Heathens and Hippos rivalry rather deepened on and off the pitch. On social media, they have their battles, but notably, another reason why is because two of their talismen, that is Dennis Etwao and Timothy Mugisha, who play also for the Uganda Sevens, managed to cross over. They made the long crossover from the Ginger Bridge all the way to Chadondo Rugby Club to play for Eden. So that goes to show you that the rugby has kind of had a few changes here, and this is a transfer that transpired towards the end of the other season, but a few issues had not yet been ironed out between the two clubs. And I think now at this particular point that was ironed out, and Timothy Mugisha and Dennis Etwa have been instrumental for the Hiddens, but unfortunately they did come up short in the final. Dennis Etwa scored the first try for Hiddens against Pirates, but Pirates managing to score a try in the dying minutes of the game, and then that was by Mubarak Wandera, and then Jones Kamiza, who had somewhat of a shaky appearance in the 15s, managed to have the nerves of steel to convert that particular score for the Pirates, and Pirates won that one 7-5. Another key fixture in the ladies is that the Avengers managed to pull one off, pulled the carpet under from the Black Pearls, managed to defeat them in Bale, and that kind of changed the course of Ugandan rugby, particularly for the women. Black Pearls have been forever dominant when it comes to women's rugby, but at this particular moment, Avengers were the team everyone was rooting for to destabilize that dominance of Black Pearls, and they did come through. They fell short in the previous final in Entebbe, but this time they managed to do so quite under a lot of pressure. And Black Pearls, for all that they pushed, managed to come out second. So we have a very, very interesting circuit at Chadondo. I don't know if the Kenyans can manage to get leave and come over to Uganda. You're always welcome, but that's the circuit that's going to happen this weekend.
We wish we would have. It just so happens that the George Mwangi Kabeberi Sevens, the fourth round of the SportPesa National Sevens Circuit, also taking place this weekend, and it will be very pivotal because, as it stands, Cabras on 61 points, Kenya Harlequin on 48 points, KCB on 45 points. So this is it. This tournament in Nairobi is the one to determine whether the title is going to be won in round 5, or whether the battle will go down to the wire. Remember, like I told you, Cabras have decided to show up for sevens this time round. They won the opening Christie Sevens. They then won the Dala Sevens this past weekend in Kisumu. In between, Kenya Harlequin won the Ingo Sevens in Kakamega. So interesting times also there. On our women's front, Impala continue to dominate. Mwamba have reached the final, but it is Impala who continue to win. And therefore, when you mentioned that result for the Avengers, because I find myself following a lot of Ugandan rugby by the way, that is a very interesting result. Now, obviously, there is some big news, Edwin, which has transcended the borders. The disciplinary action taken against Ivan Magomu, and I believe that is the reason why we're having this conversation. You being in the 256, you can probably enlighten us more on this.
Yes, as I said, we started with the Rugby Africa Cup, but Uganda has been awash, media and social as well, in respect to the disciplining of Ivan Magom. So maybe for context, Ivan Magom is the captain of the national 15s team, and also has played a big leadership role in the Pirates, the Black Pirates, who finished second in the now Special Rugby Championship and are defending champions of the sevens that they won last year. So Ivan Magom is one of those players who have played for a very, very long time. Even personally, I think when I was deciding to sign out, Magom was one of those junior players who, for what his age is, you would wonder why a player like that has so much experience, but goes to show how assertive as a player he has been in Ugandan rugby. And I think he has tormented Kenya a few times at Gong Road. We can count them on our fingertips, but it doesn't do away with that fact. So Ivan Magom has, immediately after the Rugby Africa Cup, there was communication, I think dated 5th August, where Ivan Magom was particularly sanctioned not sanctioned, but summoned for a disciplinary hearing by the Uganda Rugby Union. The communication was made by the General Secretary of the Uganda Rugby Union, and this was in respect to two charges. One of them related back to the final involving Heathens and Pirates at Chadondo Rugby Club in the now Special Rugby Championship, where it was alleged that Ivan Magomu physically and verbally assaulted the referees at following the full-time whistle of that particular game. It was a tight affair. Pirates with a late surge in that one. Emotions were all over the place, and that was reported to the union, and the union eventually brought that charge. But notably, I think where this discussion is going is in respect to the sanction or the charge in respect to particularly bringing the game into disrepute. So Ivan Magom particularly made a tweet out where maybe for politics perspective is that the permanent secretary of the treasury, that is Ministry of Finance, Mr. Ramadan Gobi, issued a letter to the National Council of Sports, who is the direct regulator of all these federations and sports unions in Uganda, particularly noting that the proposed accounting officer in this case, who is the General Secretary, Mr. Bernard Ogwell, Dr. Bernard Ogwell, was not fit for that, considering previous audit reports that had been raised from the Auditor General as well as Parliament. And the letter was written to the chairperson, I think, of the board of NCS to recommend someone else to be the accounting officer. And the board chair of NCS did reply in a letter to the permanent secretary, notifying them of their intention to stick with Dr. Bernard Ogwell as the accounting officer, and at the same time seek the intervention of the line minister to resolve the dispute in respect to who can serve as an accounting officer, because the law at the time, they made reference to a law that says that the accounting officer of NCS will be the general secretary. And in light of that communication, it was a public communication that came into public domain. Ivan Magom subsequently issued a tweet where he, among many things, I'll paraphrase this, where he said that the time for accountability has come. Dr. Bernard Ogwell and co. Have taken sportsmen for a ride or something along those lines. And from the Ugandan perspective, there's been a lot of back and forth in respect to Dr. Ogwell, in respect to alleged issues of accountability and transparency when it comes to dealing with sports and finances sent to particular federations. So that's the context upon which Ivan Magom made a tweet. And in light of that background, that tweet is what was the base of the second charge, that in you tweeting that particular letter and your statements, you are bringing the game of rugby into disrepute in violation of the player code of conduct. So these players are obliged to sign a player code of conduct, and this player code of conduct is necessary in the circumstances because it dictates and guides the conduct of players in different rugby instances, whether it's in the rugby club as well as the rugby engagements for the national team and for club as well.
Okay, quite interesting. You kind of took the question out of my mouth, because I wanted to ask, at what particular stage do they sign this code of conduct? Is it with their clubs or is it with the national teams?
Yeah, so the player code of conduct is twofold. So when you look at Uganda, my understanding of how this is done is that particularly when you look at the tournament manuals that are signed for each particular tournament. For example, in Uganda's case, we have the tournament manual for the Nile Special Championship, for the Nile Special Sevens. So each tournament has its respective tournament manual. which clubs are required to adhere to and sign off on. And in doing so, the clubs in signing off, the players by implication have also been bound by the player code of conduct that is enshrined therein. And then also secondly is that when national team players get together, they are required to also sign a player code of conduct as well as register themselves to that. So the player code of conduct is that particular disciplinary code that hovers over the players, notwithstanding the absence of any tournament. So you could arguably say that this code of conduct is one which is exists, and players, some may be aware of it, some may not, but it's something that exists vividly in Ugandan rugby spheres and has always been used in instances where there has been indiscipline by particular rugby players.
Maybe for the uninformed, the ones who are not like deeply involved in the game, like me and you, what is the length of Ivan's suspension? Number one. Number two, what impact do you think it will have on the national team? Because I do know that there is the matter of playing for World Cup qualification in 2025. I don't know when the matches begin, but just those two things, how do they come into play?
So, well, from a playing perspective, Ivan Magomu was banned for 6 weeks, 6 months. So that's quite a long time. So you're looking at it being in the near, should you say, give or take, maybe towards the beginning of next year is where you'd have him, unless his appeal is successful. So Ivan Magom lodged an appeal with the Rugby Union Appeals Committee, and that's where currently his matter is before pending any adjudication, a final appeal, and then thereafter they can explore other dispute resolution mechanisms from their end. But when you look at it from a perspective of the national team's next engagement possibly may be in November. That is, we did sign an MOU with Tunisia, where we'll be playing particular rugby fixtures against the Tunis men and women sides in rugby. So the understanding is that these particular teams will be coming to Uganda in November, as well as the Elgon Cup, as well as the Victoria Cup, considering that was revived last year. So the understanding is that Ivan Magom, if the ban subsists, will miss those games.
Oh, thank you. That's good to know. Now the backlash. You and I are both heavy users of social media. We happen to engage on a number of platforms. We've seen a lot of backlash from the the Twitterati, as I like to call them. Um, your take on the backlash, and what is the way forward? Because maybe just to play the devil's advocate here, I think you and I both know that in both our countries, sport is actually viewed as a pastime. In fact, there's a saying in Kiswahili, um, sports ni mchezo. Literally, sports is games. It's not a business. It's not an income generating activity. So, just looking at it, how then do you call sports officials into account without looking like you're ruffling their feathers? But and then secondly, the backlash. What do we make of the backlash, both for the authorities and for players who may find themselves in similar scenarios where they want to speak out?
Yeah, so ideally, from a backlash perspective, oh my God, Ugandan Twitter has been, the Twitterati has been very crazy to say the least. There's been a lot of backlash, particularly the hashtag I stand with Ivan Magom has been quite evident on social media that many people, players, journalists, fans, have even players of different fields of sport in Uganda have showed their support for Ivan Magom. I think the backlash majorly comes from two perspectives. So there is the one school of thought that believes that number one, the charge in respect to refereeing should not have stood in the first place. because it is overtaken by time. The rugby constitution of Uganda necessitates that any player to be sanctioned for disciplinary must be that disciplinary action must be taken within roughly 2 weeks from when that complaint has been made. But it appears the rugby union and the referees in this case did not adhere to the timeframes, and the disciplinary committee clearly noted that and threw out that charge on that particular front. When it comes to the aspect of the backlash in respect to the holding the game into disrepute, I think the major concern here is that the union, what people are saying on social media is the union is doing the bidding of MCS to kind of curb dissent of particular players who are vocal on particular issues. Ivan Magom, in addition to very many other players, have been very vocal on issues of player welfare, and that is what has been the backlash per se. And there had been calls for a boycott of the seventh series, particularly with the circuit in Mbale last weekend, but that wasn't achieved by those who called for the boycott. Particularly, Ivan Magom himself came out and asked the public, the fans, and the players not to boycott and go ahead with the tournament, considering he also comes from Bale. But the major backlash is that the particular refereeing charge was brought forward as a ground to allow. It was the clear upon which the charge of bringing the game on to disrepute was set forth. So that is the major backlash in Uganda, and it has sparked a debate and many conversations in respect to player welfare. What player welfare can the union enhance on to make the players experience for those who play for the national team and those even who play for their clubs to make it quite better. There has been that ongoing discussion, and it looks from the way things are going, it doesn't look like it's going to stop. It's here to stay for quite some time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be here to stay for quite some time. It reminds me of 2018 when Shuja, the Kenya Sevens team, famously pulled off that stunt in Paris, blanking out a sponsor's logo, and that was a government sponsor's logo. The backlash was heavy. Admittedly, there were problems, and I also must say that it is unprecedented to hear a national team captain being stripped of his captaincy in this part of the world, because it has always been done quietly. The next time a squad is announced, somebody's dropped. So a lot of unprecedented things, including right from the captaincy being stripped to the whole conversation around player welfare, and I'm sure is something that we are going to be having a lot in future interactions. And as we bring this discussion to an end, what is your outlook for the circuit in Chadondo this coming weekend?
Yeah, maybe before we get to the Chadondo circuit, notably in respect to the player welfare issue, we do have the Rugby Appeals Committee that is going to be constituted to hear the appeal from Ivan Magom, particularly in respect to the decision to strip the captaincy from him and ban him for 6 months from all rugby-related activities, including administrative activities. Um, so that is pending, and I mean it's very interesting because you draw parallels from different. Maybe in rugby, world rugby, the most prolific case involving indiscipline or something along those lines was Israel Folau, when he got his rugby Australia contract terminated for utterances that were deemed to be homophobic and something of a similar nature. Yet he was quoting the Bible. So one of the criticisms, again, in respect to this, is that it was a fair comment being made by a particular player who has the magnitude of far reach because of identifying as the national team captain. Another thing that was pointed out by the disciplinary committee was the aspect that he used his account where he's known as the rugby captain, and begs the question whether a personal disclaimer saying that particularly my personal opinion would have sufficed in the circumstances. Others do believe that this may be an avenue that is being used by the rugby union to play buddy buddy to the regulator in this particular case. Rugby is the second highest sponsored, not sponsored, but receives the highest amount of money after soccer in Uganda. So you wouldn't want to mess up the relationship over a tweet by your national team captain. And that could be also some school of thought that people may have on that particular matter. But as we wait for the appeal to be concluded, that's where we are currently. Chadondo, maybe from a Chadondo perspective, this is the first tournament ever being hosted by a ladies club. That is Thunderbirds, the oldest rugby club, women's rugby club in Uganda. And they also claim to be the most successful club. So this is going to be a circuit hosted by ladies, and their emphasis is that they're going to add a motherly touch to the Chadondo atmosphere. If you could quite remember what happened in the Rugby Africa Cup in 2022, the rain aside, they are very much interested in doing something at that kind of level. So Chadondo, this is an opportunity for three clubs, particularly in the men, that is Pirates, Heathens, and Rhinos, to go and blow themselves away from the rest of the pack. They're all tied on points, 32 points, which is quite unique. Rhinos lost in sudden death to Cobs in the quarterfinal, so they would very much want to come back and show what they have by reaching the semi-final this time. When it comes to the ladies, the Black Pearls and Avengers as well are tied on points. And considering Thunderbirds at home, they would very much want to put up a show for the fans. I would say Heathens going into this circuit are favorites because they are the defending champions of the Chadondo Sevens, having won that last year against Pirates. But Pirates team boosted by their sevens players. I mean, to remove a player from the pack and bring on Alex Aturinda, who starts on the national sevens team. That shows how stacked Pirates are. Heathens welcomed Aaron Ofoiro last weekend from his stint in Denmark, but also Cobs still have a few players of the national sevens team who have not participated. Ian Munyani himself, the captain of the sevens team, has not participated in the sevens. There is rumor in the grapevine that he may participate and make his debut in the sevens. Pius Ogena as well has not yet played, so we'll get to see how that goes. But Pirates and Heathens and Rhinos wouldn't put your marker past them when it comes to the men. And then when it comes to the women, trust the Avengers and Black Pearls to go at it again. But don't write off the Thunderbirds at home. They may have the opportunity to come back and shake a few tables here and there. Oh, you're muted.
There I was giving placations to Edwin, and then my mic was muted. Anyway, what I wanted to say is thank you so much for your time. I know it means a lot what you do to the game, what you do for the game with the Fat Cats podcast. Speaking of which, I need new merchandise. We'll talk about that on the side. But you guys are doing a fantastic
Very much
job.
so.
You guys are doing a fantastic job in Kampala. Looking forward to a time when we can meet up again for another session. And guys, I'll be sharing the link to FATCATS podcast, and Edwin, looking forward to more interactions with you in the future. Thanks so much for your time. All the best with everything you do, and have a blast this weekend in Kampala, in Chadi.
Thank you too. We'll keep following you as well. And thanks for the match. We'll send more your way.